For decades, kids have grown up with the Transformers, but despite its popularity, this media giant has spawned many poorly received games. Only several Transformers games have received a generally positive 75 or higher Metascore. In 2010, the streak of mediocre game releases was broken by Transformers War for Cybertron, developed by High Moon Studios for the PC, Xbox 360, and PS3. Today, I'll be taking a look at the game's history, design, story, and more, and at the end of the video, I'll be ranking it on my tier list. As with many licensed games, War for Cybertron is no longer available on digital storefronts, so picking up a used copy of the game for consoles is the easiest way to play it today. The game is placed in the Aligned Continuity family, which originally attempted to unify the lore from across the franchise. As the title of the game suggests, it covers the Great Civil War on the titular planet, but not all the way to its conclusion, as the sequel, Transformers Fall of Cybertron, covers the end of the conflict. The story here plays out in two campaigns. During the first half, players will control the Decepticons on their mission to use Dark Energon, a powerful and corrupted energy source, to infect their homeworld in the hopes of bringing about a new Golden Age. In the second campaign, players pick up immediately where the first ends, with the Autobots desperately trying to cleanse Cybertron and witnessing Optimus rise to the rank of Prime. During my childhood, I primarily interacted with the franchise through the Transformers Armada show and toys, and reruns of G1. It was great to finally experience a more cohesive depiction of the events that were only briefly shown or referenced in those shows. War for Cybertron is a third-person shooting game crafted using Unreal Engine 3, which was wildly popular during the 7th generation. Despite the engine choice and the popularity of cover-based third-person shooters during the era, the developers of High Moon Studios opted not to just make this a Gears of War clone with a Transformers coat of paint, but instead it used a faster-paced gameplay style with a greater degree of vertical traversal and platforming. This design choice meshes well with Transformers as they tend to be very mobile, and having them hide behind cover while taking pot shots at enemies wouldn't have felt right here. Instead, players can switch between robot and human form at a moment's notice, and cover great distances swiftly. Once I better understood the mechanics here and how to optimally use them, I was having a great time scrapping enemy bots. I could barrel into enemies as a vehicle, then transform and take out the survivors seconds later with my guns and melee weapons. Really, one of the main things holding back the combat here is the performance, as it really struggles to hold a consistent frame rate. Rather, it seems the preference was to instead push the consoles to their breaking point with massive environments, high levels of enemy density, and frequent effects. With that overview, let's turn to the past for a minute to understand the history of the game's development before we move further in depth on the gameplay systems and story. Having just been acquired by Activision Blizzard in 2008, High Moon Studios was given the opportunity to develop a Transformers game. High Moon was no stranger to working on licensed games, as the previous title was The Bourne Conspiracy, which drew heavily from the Bourne Identity movie and IP. This title was developed using Unreal Engine 3, and given their experience with the engine, it seemed like a good fit for War for Cybertron also. The team came up with a methodology for making sure that War for Cybertron would be a quality product by ensuring the foundation for it was a solid third-person shooter with responsive controls. Once the team was satisfied with the gameplay foundation they had crafted, they would proceed to tie in all the Transformers elements, such as the lore and character designs, into their product. When it comes down to the influences for War for Cybertron, the game was released during the Michael Bay movie era. While the movie designs were very popular and recognizable, High Moon did not want their game to be a movie tie-in, and rather looked to G1, War Within, and the Beast Wars for inspiration on their designs and lore for the game. Collaboration with Hasbro was reportedly frequent as the teams helped each other form an origin story that respected the franchise they loved. By combining excellent gameplay and the Transformers license, it was expected the game would appeal to teenagers who would play any top-rated shooter of the era, and older fans who still had nostalgia for the IP. High Moon would later go on to make two more Transformers games, one movie tie-in for Michael Bay's Dark of the Moon, and then one sequel to War for Cybertron. After that, they tackled the Deadpool license and made a Deadpool video game, but after that point, just like Raven Software, who I talked about in my Singularity video, they were turned into a Call of Duty support studio, while also assisting with the development of Destiny and Destiny 2. The Gears of War and Uncharted trilogies set the trend for the 7th console generation with their emphasis on cinematic storytelling and third-person cover-based shooting. Despite dropping cover-based mechanics, Transformers War for Cybertron followed in their footsteps by sticking to a third-person camera and using a mix of pre-rendered cutscenes and set-piece-driven sequences to progress the game's narrative. While a first-person Transformers game could work, an over-the-shoulder camera perspective lets players enjoy the designs of the fan-favorite characters. Not incorporating cover-based mechanics worked in favor of the game's design, as Cybertronians have a wide variety of abilities and forms that make constantly hiding behind cover less appealing.
Optimus Prime's location is now target locked. Powering up for maximum impact.
They're gonna kill Prime! Move, move, move!
This isn't to say all cover-based shooters keep players locked down 24/7, as games like Vanquish and Uncharted show a balance between mobility and taking cover can be struck. Here, characters move quickly and can double jump, allowing them to platform with ease. Most also come with a mobility skill mapped to the left bumper. Dashing is the most common skill, and is used for closing gaps and when caught out in the open. The hover skill is a rarer ability, which can make certain areas of the map more accessible, but also provides extra damage, with the trade-off of being a more exposed target. Pairing these skills with double jumping makes players very immobile. While some enemies might seem very out of reach, with a bit of platforming, you can often get to them in no time. All skills map to the left bumper reset on a cooldown, and cooldown skills aren't strictly mobility based, as there's also cloaking and a defensive barrier on certain characters. While we typically have mobility skills on the left bumper, on the right bumper there's usually offensive abilities that require Energon, the fuel source for Cybertronians, to activate. Energon is abundant, and you can recharge your fuel reserves by taking down enemies, smashing open destructible objects, and fighting hidden caches. Enemies and objects will drop glowing particles that will magnetize the player when you're close enough to them. The Whirlwind and Shockwave abilities are well suited to dealing with groups of enemies close to you. I felt like a barbarian from Diablo when using the Whirlwind ability, which is always satisfying. The Drain ability, on the other hand, lets you stay in battle for longer as you sap health from your enemies while restoring your own. A few of the encounters in the game are quite long and have you dealing with hordes of enemies, so being able to refill your health whenever you need to is nice with this skill. And if being a minion master is more up your alley, there's also a skill that spawns turrets. I won't give you an exhaustive list of all the abilities here, but at the start of each chapter, the character's abilities will be listed to you, allowing you to pick from the 3 characters that fit your playstyle the most. War for Cybertron feels a bit like a hero shooter in this regard, with abilities being locked to certain transformers. Speaking of the multiple characters to pick from, War for Cybertron is designed to be a squad-based game with the option to play the story mode with up to 2 other players. Sadly, in April of 2020, the servers for this game were turned off, and there's no co-op split screen available here. Fortunately, there's still some methods for playing this game online with others, on both the PS3 and PC version of the game, which I'll cover later in the video. All Transformers in the game have the option to switch between their robot and alternative mode, which is usually a vehicle of some sort. This action can be performed at any moment and happens rapidly. The form shifting really makes the player feel like a Transformer, and when I had a ton of momentum in combat, I really felt like Optimus Prime from one of the Bay movies just going on a kill streak. Flyers are my favorite character type here, but they're locked down to specific campaign levels. Their levels tend to be huge to accommodate their traversal ability. In their alternative mode, all characters have access to 1 weapon. In a couple of levels, alternative mode ammo reserves are unlimited, but otherwise they need ammo like any other weapon. Always keep these alternative mode guns in mind during combat, as even in normal difficulty battles, some encounters had me scrounging for extra bullets. Each character has a set weapon in vehicle mode, which can be seen at the start of the chapter. In their vehicle form, many Transformers have machine guns, Optimus has his rockets, and Megatron has his tank cannon. Alternative mode also has skills, but characters only get 1 and it's mobility related. There are quick turns, barrel rolls, dashing, and my favorite, ramming. All characters can get moving fast by holding down the left trigger to boost. Even while in vehicle form, non-flyer characters can jump, and if you boost, jump, and hit a ramp at the same time, you can get some major air in the game that even put me outside of the intended boundaries one time. Switching over to robot mode, all characters can be equipped with 2 weapons. The only characters with unique weapons that cannot be discarded are Megatron with his fusion cannon and Optimus with his ion blaster. Both are powerful weapons and better than most of the firearms that serve a similar purpose. Including these 2 unique guns, there's around a dozen standard weapons you can fill your 2 slots with. These guns typically fulfill the standards you see in any kind of shooter. There are assault rifles, heavy machine guns, shotguns, snipers, and rocket launchers. The weapon classifications here usually offer 2 to 3 variants, which allow players to experiment and find out what they really enjoy using. My top 3 guns were the Null Ray, the most traditional sniper in the game, Optimus's Ion Blaster, and the Scatter Blaster, a fully automatic shotgun. I was afraid landing headshots on robots wouldn't be as satisfying as some other games, but I'm happy to say I was wrong, and using the Null Ray, Energon Battle Pistol, or the Photon Burst Rifle to snipe was always a joy. There is one support weapon called the Energon Repair Ray, but for me playing campaign alone, this weapon was meaningless to lug around, as your AI companions can't die. Nonetheless, I did appreciate it when the AI companions used it to patch me up. Enemies won't drop their weapons upon being defeated, so instead you'll need to search around the levels for more guns. Ammo can also be quite scarce in encounters, as there are tons of enemies. To refill your ammo, you'll need to find ammo crates, which are kind of common, but spaced out between the battles. Because of this, you'll need to make sure to use all of your abilities and weapons in both robot and alternative mode to clear longer fights.
Hard on!
Nothing can stop me. Nothing!
Beyond the arsenal of standard weapons, levels may also feature mounted turrets. These turrets come in two flavors: the Ion Displacer, a heavy machine gun, and the Nucleon Shock Cannon, a missile launcher. While mounted to their stands, turret weapons have unlimited ammo, and just like in Halo 3, these turrets can be torn from their mounts, limiting their ammo supply, but turning you into a portable menace. Movement while equipped with these heavy weapons is slower, and attempting to swap to any of your other guns will drop the turret. If getting up close and personal is more of your style, melee attacks are also in the game. When melee attacking, all characters break out their weapon of choice, be it an axe, a mace, or something else. These attacks are powerful and will kill most regular enemies in a single hit. Beyond that, there are grenades. They come in 4 different flavors with frag, EMP, and energon grenades, as well as the thermo mines. These largely function as how you'd expect. The frag grenade does damage in a radius, the EMP grenade stuns nearby enemies, the energon grenade heals allies, and the thermo mines detonate when enemies get close enough to it. The EMP grenades were my favorite to use, as I enjoy the animation of Cybertronians glitching out before I punch their ticket. Since all characters can transform, move quickly, and most have mobility skills, the best levels in the game have large environments with platforming and verticality. I had a particular affinity for the 2 flyer levels in the game, as bombing around as a plane really makes the levels feel massive. War for Cybertron is at its worst when the levels devolve into a corridor shooter. A few segments of the game force you into engagements in these narrow corridors. It's a mixed bag though, as some of these segments take place during a prison escape, and the story bits there are very fun. Levels in the game are populated with a reasonable variety of enemies, some of which only appear in the Decepticon or Autobot campaign. The standard group of enemies is filled with shotgunners, machine gunners, snipers, scouts, scientists that heal, and typically a distinct leader who's a bit tougher than the average bot. During some of these firefights, flyers can also buzz around the battlefield, constantly bugging the players like annoying mosquitoes. Cloaking enemies also appear across both campaigns, and I almost always found EMP grenades near their encounters, which work perfectly against them. When it comes to the big boys, brutes and heavy soldiers are more powerful than your typical enemy. Brutes fortify themselves with large shields, allowing them to safely close a distance to players before striking with their hammers. Attacking them from the back is the only way to hurt them, and this would be much easier if done with human teammates, as the AI companions aren't the wisest. Heavy soldiers wield the formerly mentioned turrets and can rip you apart if you're not careful. Once taken down, they'll drop their heavy guns, which can help turn the tide of an encounter. Destroyers are the final enemy I'll mention here, and while they don't quite qualify as bosses, they are much larger and dangerous than the typical enemy. On the topic of bosses, War for Cybertron does feature some enjoyable boss battles, but some become a bit too formulaic. Bosses are typically invincible, and players will need to survive their onslaught or exploit a weakness before they can hurt the boss. I'll be talking a bit more in depth about these standout boss fights as they happen in the story, which we'll move into now. Transformers War for Cybertron focuses on the escalation of the conflict between the Autobots and Decepticons. When starting the game, you get a kick-ass pre-rendered cutscene that really makes you want to dive into the story mode. As mentioned in the intro, the story is split into 2 campaigns, each with 5 missions. Most missions on the standard difficulty took me between 40 minutes to 1 hour to complete. The voice talent here is exceptional, with Peter Cullen reprising his role as Optimus.
Information for him.
I am Optimus.
Many other well-regarded voice actors are featured here as well, with the likes of Steve Blum, Nolan North, Troy Baker, and a decent chunk of the Critical Role cast. There's a healthy amount of banter during gameplay and cutscenes, and all feels authentic to the Transformers characters and lore.
Through my will alone shall Cybertron be restored.
It's too unstable, Megatron. Using that power, you're endangering our entire world.
Teach me, Megatron. Teach me to wield Dark Energon the way you do. And
During the first half of the story, you take control of Megatron and his Decepticons. Megatron has acquired an obsession with Dark Energon, a corrupted energy source which destroys almost anything it touches, believing that with it he can conquer the planet and restore the golden age of Cybertron. During the first chapter of the game, Megatron, Brawl, and Barricade attack an orbital base, with the Guardian Army being led by none other than Starscream. Seeing Starscream and Megatron on opposing sides during this time period makes sense and helps explain the unique relationship between them.
Surrender your Dark Energon program to me immediately!
Dark Energon? Are you mad? Dark Energon brings only death and chaos.
I am Count.
The Defense Force proves to be little trouble for the invading Decepticons. Just as Megatron makes direct contact with the Dark Energon stored at the heart of the facility, Starscream berates him, as no one has contacted the substance and survived. Megatron ignores him and defies expectations by emerging intact and wielding the corrupted power. He immediately begins to spread to his allies. Starscream is floored by the turn of events and ultimately pledges himself to the Decepticon cause. Megatron accepts his service only as Starscream knows how to manufacture more of the Dark Energon. Jetfire, a nearby Autobot, is horrified by the new alliance and retreats to warn Zeta Prime, the current leader of the Autobots, of the impending threat. Now a part of the Decepticon army, Starscream and his goons travel down to the planet's surface to reactivate an ancient Energon bridge. This facility plays a pivotal role in Megatron's offensive, as it allows Dark Energon manufacturing. Beyond reactivating the bridge and returning to the orbital base, there's not much to note here in Chapter 2 regarding the story. Each campaign features one flyer mission, and each is fantastic. The environment here is pretty large and is filled with hazards you'll have to avoid. With a reliable source of Dark Energon at his disposal, Megatron initiates the attack on Iacon, the capital city of the Autobots. Megatron allows Starscream to run the main siege against the city as he, Soundwave, and Breakdown head behind the enemy lines in search of the Omega Key. This artifact grants access to the core of Cybertron, and once there, Megatron hopes to infect the planet itself with Dark Energon. After fighting their way to what they believed was the holding place of the Omega Key, they are contacted by Zeta Prime, who reveals he has taken the key into his possession. Not deterred by this change of events, Megatron sets his sight on Prime and blasts his way to the heart of the city with a Dark Energon-infused bombing run. Now face to face with the Autobot leader, the group of Decepticons battles Zeta Prime, who is enhanced by Autobot machinery. This boss battle is a great example of how several play out. Zeta Prime manipulates the stage and can create environmental hazards that do massive damage if they hit the player. Dodge these attacks for long enough, and he'll begin to spawn enemies. You'll still have to pay attention to the environmental attacks, as they can easily flatten you while you're dealing with other weaker foes. Once all the created enemies are dealt with, Prime will need time to recharge, giving you the opportunity to shoot him with everything you've got. The fight will continue to escalate in difficulty, but rinse and repeat this about 3 times and you'll have bested him. Zeta is crushed by falling debris at the end of the battle and gravely wounded by Megatron, who prematurely celebrates the seizure of the Omega Key. Zeta informs him that the device he stole will only bring the Omega Key to him. At first this doesn't seem like an issue, however the true Omega Key is the Titanic Autobot known as Omega Supreme.
Omega activated. Power optimal. Mission: destroy Megatron.
After leaving the battle with Prime, the Decepticons are still searching for the Omega Key, when out of nowhere, Omega Supreme attacks and destroys their ship. Having crash landed back in Iacon, Megatron, Soundwave, and Breakdown make a frantic escape from the colossal Autobot. Believing Megatron to be dead from the attack and unable to communicate with the trio, Starscream uses this opportunity to take control of the Decepticon army. Megatron is infuriated by this, but swears he'll deal with the Deviant later. For the majority of this level, players will be bouncing from one skirmish to another, while Omega Supreme pursues them. After climbing a tower in Iacon, the group comes across ion turrets, allowing them to finally defend themselves and knock Omega Supreme out of flight. The last chapter of each campaign is a massive boss fight, and here, while trying to salvage Omega Supreme, he transforms into his robot form, forcing players to fight him once more. This is a 2-phase battle, and during the first phase, players must destroy the turrets surrounding Supreme's body. Once the turrets have been dealt with, he will attempt to recharge by grabbing a nearby battery. Corrupt the battery he's going for with Dark Energon, and it will render him vulnerable. After knocking out Omega's first health bar, his chest will open up, exposing his core as he goes all out, blasting the players non-stop with artillery and lasers. His core is exposed for the whole second phase, allowing you to damage him at any moment. Just be careful of the barrage of missiles constantly headed in your way. After defeating the Autobots' last line of defense, Megatron corrupts Omega Supreme. With the key to the planet's core and the Autobots' greatest weapon under his control, nothing is left to stop Megatron as he enters the core and infects the whole planet with Dark Energon. Starting off with the Decepticons makes sense, as it sets up a difficult situation for you to overcome as the Autobots in the second campaign, but I didn't think Megatron would essentially just win the war here.
With Dark Energon infused into the core, Cybertron is mine to command!
Coming back from this position seems insurmountable, but luckily for the Autobots, a warrior named Optimus Prime is about to make his rise and help restore some hope in this war that seems all but lost. There's a definite change in tone between the two campaigns. While the Decepticons are constantly enduring insults thrown at them by Megatron, the Autobots have a kinship among them and a strong sense of desperation as they try and claw back what they can. Starting off the second campaign, players take control of Optimus, Bumblebee, and Ratchet. Chapter 6 begins with Bumblebee having his first encounter with Optimus, informing him that their leader, Zeta Prime, is dead. With the High Council of Autobots in hiding, their forces are directionless, and Optimus knows he must act. The opening area here shows the fragile state that the Autobots left in Icon are in. Optimus leads the two others on a run to enable the city's planetary guns to push back the invading forces' aerial power. Next, the group heads to the Decagon, the center of the city's defenses, where they can communicate with all the Autobot ground forces. The trip to the Decagon is awesome, as you'll rip around these speedways and hit some jumps along the way. Ironhide steps in here too, coordinating with the group to reclaim the Decagon. During the expedition, the group fights with Starscream in our first boss fight of this campaign. This boss battle is a straightforward affair, as Starscream will flip between his vehicle and robot form and is vulnerable for the entirety of the fight. Now with the Decagon in their control, the group coordinates the city's defenses and immediately receives a distress signal from the believed to be deceased Zeta Prime. Prime informs the group he is still alive and being held in the Decepticons' Kaon prison complex.
In Megatron's Kaon prison complex.
Prime is alive? Ratchet, home in on that signal and boost it.
On it!
Although this could clearly be a trap, Optimus says they must go if there's any chance Prime is still alive. Chapter 7 begins with Optimus, Sideswipe, and Bumblebee arriving to the Kaon prison as they allow themselves to be captured. This level features many tight quarters, which is where the gameplay is unfortunately at its worst. Despite the level not being optimal for combat, the prison is still interesting to explore, and the inmates here are not being treated well.
You're next, Autobot! Up against the wall!
Optimus, this is all part of the plan, right?
Ready!
Optimus!
Aim! Look out! Optimus!
Almost as soon as the Autobots arrive, they break free and venture deeper into the heart of the complex. Megatron reveals himself, and to the surprise of no one, he orchestrated the distress signal to lure Optimus into his grasp.
Rescuing Zeta Prime, which is why I orchestrated the entire thing. Zeta contacting you, your capture, all of it, all to bring you before me.
As the group makes their way through the prison, they free their fellow Autobots, and in doing so, create enough of a distraction to make it to the holding place of Zeta Prime. While breaking Prime free from the machines that bind him, Soundwave attacks with his ensemble of Decepticon pals, and a boss fight ensues. Soundwave sends one of his 3 companions to fight the player, and once you've done enough damage to the currently deployed one, Soundwave will run out to heal them. During these repairs, Soundwave can be damaged and will rotate through the other bots until the fight concludes. With Soundwave defeated, Zeta Prime reveals he is too weak to continue and dies. Optimus returns his corpse to the Council of Elders, who call for Optimus to rise to the occasion and clear the planet of the Dark Energon blight. Optimus accepts the burden and rises as the last Prime.
I will accept the burden with all that I am.
Rise, Optimus Prime, for you are the leader of the Autobots. You are
The last Prime.
Now the leader of the Autobots, Optimus Prime, Ironhide, and Warpath set forth to free Omega Supreme and gain access to the core of Cybertron. An army of Decepticons stands between the group and Omega Supreme, but they make it to him against the odds, and with Ratchet's aid, they repair him, granting them access to the Omega Gate, which allows them to travel into the depths of the planet. In the depths of Cybertron, they come across a friendly bunch of space slugs, who help maintain homeostasis on the planet. The Autobots mount up on the space slugs and make a final push to the core.
To ride them. They can sense we're here to help.
My sentiments exactly.
This segment was a bit goofy, but I enjoyed the idea of Optimus mounting up like a cowboy on his space slug. The last adversary on the way to the core is a corrupted slug, who provides an enjoyable boss battle following the pattern of attacking while invincible, then becoming vulnerable while recharging. After felling the corrupted beast and accessing the core of the planet, it warns Optimus that its spark, its very soul, has been corrupted, and in order to repair itself, it must shut down for millions of years. As a parting gift, the core imparts the Matrix of Leadership to Optimus Prime, a powerful artifact containing the knowledge of the previous Primes.
Recognizes and welcomes Optimus Prime, Keeper of the Matrix, Leader of the Free Autobots.
With the Matrix in his possession, Optimus sets forth to evacuate the majority of the Cybertronians from the planet as he and a small battalion of Autobots stay behind to fight. Megatron is disgusted by this evacuation attempt and uses his orbital station to destroy the escaping vessels. In response, Optimus dispatches Silverbolt, Air Raid, and Jetfire to disable the orbital base. Once inside the vessel, the team of flyers is successful in shutting down the station, but a backup power system keeps the base functional. Desperate to stop the station from destroying Iacon, they realize the whole base is a Cybertronian known as Trypticon, as it begins to insult their efforts, calling the situation futile.
More Autobots die.
You cannot stop me, little Autobots. I am Trypticon. I am your death.
Oh, great Primus. I think this gun is a Cybertronian.
I live to serve Megatron and to destroy Autobots.
In an all-for-nothing move, the team destroys Trypticon's conversion cog, forcing him to change back into his robotic form where he can no longer stay in orbit.
We made it. Let's finish this guy off.
You haven't defeated me, Autobots. You have only untethered your own destroyer.
What's it gonna take?
The Flyers battle Trypticon during his descent towards the planet, causing him to crash into the surface, where Optimus and crew head to finish the beast off. I have to say that Trypticon's scale seems a bit inconsistent here. While he's in orbital station, he seems absolutely massive, whereas in descent and in the battle, he's scaled back significantly. To wrap up the Autobot campaign, Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, and Ironhide fight to take Trypticon down. This boss battle is like a bullet hell stage, as the level isn't very large and Trypticon will attack you constantly. While battling Trypticon, weak points appear around his body, which need to be destroyed to progress the battle. After beating him, many of the Cybertronians can leave the planet safely on galactic transports. Optimus and his best comrades stay behind on the planet to resist Megatron, while they build an arc to eventually depart Cybertron. Once you've wrapped up both campaigns, you're greeted with a well-animated closing credit sequence and an awesome song. Completing the campaigns rewards players with new characters they can use in escalation mode, which is inaccessible without a bit of tinkering. On average, it should take most players around 9 hours to clear the War for Cybertron campaign, and that fits right in line with my playthrough. The story is not complex here, but it does do a good job showing the conflict from both sides, and provides a good bit of nostalgia for anybody that grew up with the Transformers. Some of you may have been able to tell from the gameplay footage in the video, but War for Cybertron does not run particularly well. Combat sequences struggle to hold a consistent 30 FPS, and boss battles suffer even more. While I played through the game on the Xbox 360, there is also a PC version of the game, which is regrettably capped to 30 FPS and no longer digitally purchasable. As far as I can tell, there was no physical release for the PC version, so if you want to play it today, you'll have to resort to some other methods. Like many PC games left with fixed FPS caps by devs, there is a high frame rate patch made by the community. From what I was able to garner online, the PC port was not the best, and for the sequel, Transformers Fall of Cybertron, the PC release was handled by a different studio altogether. Outside of the choppy performance, the game can look quite nice, although it appears a bit grey and washed out. 7th generation games were notorious for having a desaturated color palette, and War for Cybertron rides the edge of that classification. Cybertron is a planet primarily covered by metal, so it would be hard not to avoid this look, but some areas in the game stand out as they're filled with colorful light. Transformers Devastation is a title developed by Platinum Games and released years later, and it has a much more vibrant color palette, which helps the game pop and hold up visually years after its release. This, however, does work well with its more cartoonish design language. While the official servers for War for Cybertron were closed in April 2020, there are still methods of interacting with the online components of the game. Attempting to open any of the multiplayer menus without setting anything up first results in the game just telling you its servers are offline. As of April 2023, the Transformers re-energized Discord community still organizes competitive multiplayer and escalation mode matches on the PS3 and PC. Regrettably, I didn't play online in any of these modes, so I can't personally speak on them much. If you do want to join in on the fun they're having, check out their Discord server, and it seems like you don't even need to mod your PS3 to play online with them, you just need to set up some internet settings in the console's menu. Escalation is this game's horde mode, and it was very popular during this era of gaming. Bonus characters unlocked from the campaign, DLC characters, and all the regular characters in the campaign can be used here. In the competitive multiplayer, custom characters can be created and leveled up, granting them new skills. When creating a multiplayer character, 4 classes were on offer, giving unique skills, movement speeds, and vehicle forms. These forms were Scout, Scientist, Leader, and Soldier. Multiplayer playlists are what you would normally expect from a third-person shooter, with team and free-for-all deathmatch, capture the flag, a domination-like game mode, and several more. The game's fanbase seemed to have really loved the multiplayer featured in this title, so I'm a bit sad I never played this game growing up when its popularity and player base were at their peak. Outside of the multiplayer, there's an additional content section of the main menu screen, which lets players watch the credits, view select concept art of the game's characters and environments, as well as viewing previously seen cutscenes from the game's story mode. Transformers War for Cybertron had a couple of companion titles, with Transformers Cybertron Adventures, an on-rail shooter for the Wii developed by Next Level Games, and 2 portable versions of War for Cybertron made for the Nintendo DS by Vicarious Visions. The DS versions come in an Autobot and Decepticon flavor, giving you access to one of the 2 campaigns, and following the Nintendo trend of splitting titles into 2 versions for more sales. Given the strong critical reception of War for Cybertron, a sequel was greenlit, and in August 2012, Transformers Fall of Cybertron was released and developed once again by High Moon Studios. The campaign in Fall of Cybertron is single-player exclusive, and I've heard good things about it, so in the future, you can expect to see a video from me on the game. Now, having covered the game's history, story, gameplay, and even the spin-off titles, it's time we move to the tier list and rank this game. Ranking just the campaign of Transformers War for Cybertron, the game comes in at a C. It has fun gameplay, great characters, and an interesting but simple story, but it's marred by its technical performance, which can be distracting during combat and annoying during cutscenes and big events in the game. Making these video retrospectives is always a good time, but War for Cybertron was a bit of a unique case because I had never played the game before, unlike the other titles I've covered. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And to finish it off, here's a quick tease on what's coming for the next video retrospective.
You were weak when I found you. Now your hatred has become your strength.